This video is going to cover the site plan assignment. Now, make sure that you have downloaded the instructions as well as the two files that show the line weights and the layers associated with the final product. And then, of course, too, there is a DWT file up on As You Learn, which is an AutoCAD template that's going to make this assignment a lot more helpful. I can't download it from As You Learn because at the time I'm recording this, As You Learn is currently getting like refreshed or is currently down. But I have downloaded the template file. You don't want to open the template file, you just want to have it downloaded. So in AutoCAD, what we're going to do is we are going to open up a new file, but we're going to click on our little down arrow here next to new. And then we are going to browse templates. And then you're going to look in your download folder. And then you're going to want to use this site plan template here. So go ahead and open that up. Now, when you open up the site plan template, it's going to automatically, and I'll just close that out for a second so I can show you how to open it back up if you don't have it open already. It's going to bring us into paper space, which typically it drops us here in model space, which is what we're familiar with, but our template for this one is in paper space just to kind of introduce you to it. So this is where we would set files up to get them ready for printing. So we've got a title block in here, and then we also have this viewport, which is then essentially looking into our model space. So everything that we do in model space will update automatically here in this viewport. So just a couple of things that will update within our title block here. So it says your major here. So go ahead and double click on where it says that. And you'll replace that with your major, whether you are sustainable technology or building sciences. Keep in mind, if you are construction management or if you are a architectural technology and design, you are a building science major. We do not have an architecture major. We do not have a construction management major. We have a building science major. If you wanted to put a -CM or a -ATD next to it, that's totally fine. We'll leave our course name alone here. For class assignment, we'll call this class, and today, as I'm filming this, this would be my in-class assignment number 1, but depending on you and when you're doing this, it might be 2 or 3, so pay attention to what we call it in class, but I'll just call it class 1. We're at the bottom of our title block where we have our last name and first name. Go ahead and double click on that. Again, you want to make sure you're lettering all of this, which just means that you have caps lock on. So you'll do your last name, comma, your first name. If your last name is really long and your first name doesn't fit on this one line, it's okay if it goes to 2. You can just drag that up a little bit, or you can also just do like your first initial. For the date, I'm going to double click on where we have our date. As I'm recording this, the year is 2025, the month is May, and the day is the 19th, but you might have a different date. And then our scale, title, and sheet ID have already been set for us in this template file, so we don't need to adjust anything to do with those. So now we'll go back into model space by clicking on our little tab down here in the bottom left. And essentially, within this file, we have been given all of this data from a land surveyor. So they have gone to the site, they've surveyed locations of trees, any other site features, and given us all of our contour lines, as well as like given us our north arrow. But since this land surveyor doesn't really know our layer system, they sent us the file over all in layer 0. And then I have imported it into our layer system that we typically use. So within our layers, we have some that we're pretty familiar with. A anno for all of our annotations. Our def point layer, it is a different color in this one than it is in some of our others. We could, of course, change the color if we want. We can click on the color there. And like I often use this peachy color, so I can just make it so that now a anno is this peachy color. We have our hatch patterns as well as our hatch fill or our poche. This is for our paper space, our title block, and our viewports. We have our civil layers, so our site features, our building footprint, any plants or trees, our property lines, our setbacks, our topography that we may be changing or grading, and then our topography that's currently existing. So we've got all of our different layers going down in here. I'm also just going to open my properties bar back up. You may have already had it here and kept it here, but just again, as a refresher for how to get that up, is the keyboard shortcut PROP. And then I just usually will have my properties, when it first comes in, it's kind of floating up here. Whoop. It's floating in this corner. I like just dragging it and snapping it onto the side of my screen. So the first thing we're going to do, according to our instructions, is we are going to set our annotation scale for the viewport to be 1 inch equals 30 feet. When we do this, it's not going to look like anything happened, but it's going to be a big change for our next step when we are going to go adjust all of our layers for our layer system in there. So to change this, we're going to go in model space right down to this corner here where our scale currently is set to 1 to 1. We're going to click on that and we're going to change it to 1 inch equals 30 feet. And it looks like nothing happened. What we want to do is refresh our drawing. It'll still look like nothing happened, but a change will happen once we start adjusting our layers. We're going to type the command regen, R-E-G-E-N, enter, and that'll kind of refresh it. And then we'll start adjusting our layers. So we're going to place the various lines on the appropriate layers, referring to the layer descriptions or the descriptions I kind of just went through, with a couple of notes. So the stream and the road, as well as any site utility, should be on the layer C site. Any circle that does not define the meets and bounds of the property line are going to be the locations of trees. All hatch patterns should be on the layer A anno pat or A anno poche, depending on the type of hatch used. And any note in the north arrow should be on layer A anno. So we'll kind of work our way through. I'll start with just my topography line. So I'm going to select all these topo lines. I'm going to skip this. This is my stream boundary. You'll have to excuse me. There's a cool guy driving his car down the road. So I don't know if you can hear him. So I'm going to select all these. I could go click on each one individually, but you'll notice that like I'm using my selection tool to kind of be able to grab a bunch at once. And I'm using this green dotted one to kind of do cross selections over this blue solid one to do the window. So I'm getting all those topography lines and I'm going to put them on this layer C topo exists, this gray layer. And so now they're going to have a dash to them, or they're going to be a hidden line style, and they're also gray for it. My 2 lines for my road are going to be in the layer C site, this magenta layer. Then I'll hit escape a bunch of times. My 2 lines for my stream boundary are also going to be in C site. And then our site utilities, we have one right here. And we have another one pretty close to one of our boundaries right here. Those are also going to be on C site as well. And so these could be water, these could be sewage, these could be electrical. We don't have a label necessarily for them, so that would be something we'd have to add to it, but those are going to be our 2 site utilities. Our property boundary is going to be this kind of really awkward hexagon here. So I'm going to select those circles and lines. This one here that's doubled up, this is our point of beginning when we're measuring our property. I'm just going to go through and select all of them and switch them to C site prop, this red layer. Our north arrow, as well as this stream and the road, are going to be in our cyan layer, A anno. And then all of these other circles are going to be our trees. So one easier way to go about selecting just these trees is to do our window selection, where you click and go towards the right, where you get this solid blue option. So that way we're not picking up, if I was to go towards the left, I'm getting all of this other stuff I don't want. So I'm just going to select all my trees. And I'm going to put those on the blue layer C-site plant for it. And so that's dealing with all of my objects and their current layers. The next thing we're going to do is you are going to name the stream your last name stream, and you are going to name the road your first name road. Our text should be 3 feet in model space, and I know that seems extremely large, but you'll have to think about how stuff is getting scaled onto a sheet of paper. Our text here is already 3 feet, so you can just go ahead and double click on this text here. And again, you're going to make it your last name stream. If it bugs you that it's on 2 lines, you can click and drag that to make it all 1 line. And then you can just click off of it to exit the text editor. And then the road, you're going to make it your first name road. Again, you can drag that out and then click off to finish editing. Now, if I wanted to spin this just to kind of make it parallel with my road as well, I can click on the text box and use rotate, which is keyboard shortcut RO, or right click rotate, and then you can grab it by a base point and you can kind of eyeball it a little bit to be parallel with the road there. The next step that we'll do from our instructions is we're going to label some of our contour or topography. So each contour interval in the site represents 1 foot of grade change. Each bold contour is 5 feet of change. And so we're going to label each bold contour line with text that is going to be 3 foot tall in model space. The lowest bold contour line is at 3,333 feet. The lowest point in our entire site is at the stream, though. So our lowest bold contour line is at that 3,333 feet, but the lowest point in our site overall is at this stream. So we're actually sloping downwards towards the stream, and then we're sloping back up. So that's why these two have the same label on them, even though they're at 2 different points within our building or within our context. So to create those, we could copy this text box here. So I could take this text box, I could right click, copy, grab it by a point, put it here, hit escape 100 times, and then I could double click on it and change that text to say 3,333, and I could then like move it closer. So that could be one option. I'm just going to delete that text box though, just to kind of give an example of creating another text box. Is I can switch my layer over to a ano, this cyan layer. I could start the text tool, which is keyboard shortcut T, enter. I'll make a text box from one corner to another. Now it wants to create my text at 1/8 of an inch size. When I go to switch this to 3 feet, it's gonna look ginormous when I go start typing. I promise, once you click out of it, it will not be ginormous anymore. It's just kind of relative of from going to 1/8 visually to 3 feet is just gonna be why it looks that large. So again, text is keyboard shortcut T. You can click where do you want your text box to sit. And then up here is where you can change your text size to 3 feet. Enter. And we can make it say, let me zoom out so I can see what I'm typing. And then we can close our text editor. We can make an individual text box for each of these. I'm just going to use the copy tool to copy it onto each one of these bold lines. So I'm going to click on that text, right click, copy, grab it, onto all 4 of those, hit escape 100 times. And then again, we're going down towards the stream, back up. So this would stay the same. This one I'll double click on to change it to 38. And then this one I'll double click on to change it to 43 for it. Next, then we're going to add in our setbacks. So we're going to offset the front of our property, or the side parallel to the road, and the rear parallel to the stream 20 feet in. And then we're going to offset the sides 10 feet in to represent the property setbacks. We'll use trim or extend. We can also use the fillet tool to clean up those setbacks in there. So I'm going to start offset, which is keyboard shortcut O, enter. Again, my personal preference is to always use through, so I'm just going to hit enter again. I'm going to bring these lines in 20 feet. So that one and this one in 20. And then this side here at the back of our property in 20 as well. And then I'll bring the sides in 10 feet. Next, I'm going to hit escape 100 billion times, and I'm going to use the fillet tool to kind of clean our setbacks up. This way they are looking like these setbacks here. So I could use trim and extend. I'm going to use the fillet tool, which will work pretty similarly and also kind of expedite my process a little bit. So fillet is keyboard shortcut F, enter. And instead of defining a radius, I'm going to leave my radius set alone. So it's just going to bring two lines to meet each other. But what I am going to do is select this multiple option in my command bar. And then I want to click on the sides of the lines I want to keep. So I'm going to click on this line, and it's going to bring those two together. This one, and it'll bring them together. And you do want to pay attention to the side you're clicking on. So this line and this line together. This one here's very easy to miss. We want to click on the sides we want to keep. The sides we want to keep. And one last time, the sides we want to keep. Now, what made fillet a better option of just kind of cleaning that up is that fillet also, if we hit escape a bunch of times, made this all one joined polyline or one joined piece. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to switch its layer to see site setback. So it's now in this green dashed line. All right. Next, we're going to offset the stream boundary lines 25 feet away from the stream to represent a wetland easement on the property. And then we're going to trim those lines to the site property line and change their line type to hidden 2. So we're going to leave them magenta, but change their line type. So I'm going to switch. Well, I guess I don't need to switch my layer. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to use the offset tool. Enter. Again, I always like through, so I'm going to hit enter again. I'm going to bring this line up 25 feet, down 25 feet. Then I'm going to use the trim tool to trim them to the property line. So I'll hit escape 100 times. TR for trim, to trim just those lines, not my stream. I want to leave my stream alone. And then we're going to hit escape 100 times. We want to change these lines. We want to leave them on this magenta site layer, but we want to do a line type override to switch them to hidden 2. So that way they are showing that they are the the easement, the wetland easement for it. Next, we're going to hatch the stream with the pattern ANSI 31 and the appropriate layer. Our hatch angle is going to be 135. Our hatch scale is going to be 192. Now we're going to run into a problem when we try to hatch this because hatch has to be a closed area and this stream very much is not closed. So what I'm going to do before I hatch is I'm going to switch my layer to a anode depth point, and then I'm just going to draw a line. So L, enter, from one corner to another. I'll end the line tool. I'll go back into it. And then I'll hit escape 100 times, and now I should be able to hatch my stream. It still might give me one issue or one hard time, but I can't tell unless it happens. So let's try. So I'm going to switch my layer to a anopat for this hatch pattern. I'm going to use the hatch tool. So that's keyword shortcut H, enter. For my pattern, I want ANSI 31. I want an angle of 135 and a scale of 192. And then I can click in my area. So there was what it did where it gave me a hard time. It clicked in here and it filled in the whole part. So I'm going to use Control Z. I'm going to hit escape 100 times. I'm going to go back in the hatch tool and I'm going to try to click in there again, and that resolved my problem. Why does it happen? I don't know, but I do know how to fix it. And then we'll hit escape a bunch of times. Next, we're going to create our building footprint. So I would recommend doing this off to the side and then we can move it into place later. So we are going to draw a 24 foot by 18 foot rectangle to represent our building footprint of our conditioned building with a shed roof. On the south side, we're going to do a 6 foot deep, 4 foot wide, 6 foot wide, 4 foot deep porch with two 11-inch deep steps. And then we'll put it onto our property. So I'm going to do it off to the side here and then move it into place later. So I'm going to change my layer to this yellow layer, Seaside Building. And then I'm going to start the rectangle tool to draw a rectangle that is 24 feet. Whoops. Let's go back. 24 feet by 18 feet. I almost did 24 inches. And then for my porch, I'll create another rectangle, REC. I'm going to just start it on this corner. I'm going to make it 6 foot by 4 foot. And then I'm going to move it over. So I'm going to click on it and use the move tool to move it over. I believe 1 foot would be where it sits. I'm trying to think of how much that would be if this was middle. Yeah, I believe so. Okay, and then I'm going to make another step. So I'm going to make REC again. From here, 6 foot tab, 11 inches. And then back in the rectangle tool, another one, 6 foot, 11 inches. So here's my building footprint. We'll skip over this for now, and we're going to move over to, we're going to hatch it with a solid fill hatch pattern. So for my hatch, I'm going to go into a anneau poché. I'm going to use the hatch tool to do a solid fill for my building. Hit escape 100 times. And then I'm going to label my building 1-story building with text that is 3 feet tall. So I'm going to switch my layer to a anneau, this cyan layer. I'm going to create a text box, keyword shortcut T, enter from the top left to the bottom right. I'm going to justify my text to the middle center, and then I'm going to make my text height 3 feet, and I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to call it 1-story building, and then once I click off of here, it won't be gigantic anymore. Next, then, I'm going to move it into place, and we want to think about some intelligent design strategies for moving this building into place. So one of those things is we want to try to minimize any changes to our grade and to our land for it. So we want to try to find an area that's already sort of level to put it potentially. So looking at our contours, anywhere these contours are grouped closer means it's going to be steeper, which means we'll have to make more changes to create a level surface to build on. So we want to try to avoid that wherever we can, but it's going to be difficult to do on this site because of just, the piece of land that we've purchased. The other thing we want to keep in mind is that we can only build inside our property, but then we also have our setbacks to consider, so we can only build within this area, and we also can't build within our wetlands easement. So even though this is our property down here, we really can't build anything in this area. We've got this small area, I think this is like a 7-foot span here, where technically we could build, but really I can't do much there. So that only leaves this area, and if we want to try to minimize making changes to our site, we really can't be knocking down all of these trees, so that really sort of leaves this area here to build in or build on. So that's one thing to consider. Additionally, when we go to move this into place, what's going to happen is it's going to want to snap to things automatically. And usually object snaps are such a helpful tool for us, but right now they're going to be a pain in the tush. So what we're going to do is turn our object snaps off using either the F3 key on your keyboard or this button right here, the little square with a square. So if I turn object snaps off, I'm now able to just move freely in my drawing. So I'm going to highlight my whole building, and then I'm going to use the move tool, which is keyboard shortcut M, or right click, move, grab the building somewhere. Again, it's not going to snap to anything. And then I'm going to kind of eyeball where I want to put my building. I'll put her about here for it. Now, our last thing that we'll do is we are going to use either the spline tool or the polyline tool to make some grading modifications to our building to create a new drainage pattern to just kind of help water flow around. So you'll see in the example, that's what these solid lines coming off the building are. Those are going to be our grading modifications for it. So with that in mind, a couple of things we need to always pay attention to when creating grading lines is one, they have to come off of the topography. So they have to be coming off of the contour line and then going back into it. Essentially, you can think of it as if you're taking this and you are pushing that dirt back. So you're creating almost like a hill of sorts here, and you're sort of leveling this area out a little bit. So almost like a retaining wall of sorts in it. Additionally, contour lines can never, ever, 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 ever cross each other. So you'll notice that none of these lines are going over each other in them for it. So that's another important thing to keep in mind with it. I'm going to leave my object snaps still turned off as I add these grading modifications in. And then at the end, hopefully I'll remember to turn them back on, because usually then I open up AutoCAD and I forget that they have them off. So I'm going to switch my layer to this C topo layer for my grading modifications. And you can use spline or polyline to do this. Now, a key thing to think about with spline, or remember with spline, is that you have to hit enter at the end. You cannot hit escape for it. So spline is keyboard shortcut SPL, enter. I'm going to overshoot my line of where I want it to start. And I'm going to just kind of click to place points. And then when I'm done, I need to hit enter, not escape. So again, I'll go into spline, SPL, enter, overshoot it. Enter to finish it. Spline, SPL, overshoot it, enter to finish. I now want to trim them to those lines, so I'm going to do keyboard shortcut TR, enter for trim, and I'm going to cut them down to it. I'll hit escape 100,000 times. And then I'm going to want to make sure that I remember to turn my object snaps back on. So that way, next time I go into AutoCAD, I don't forget about them. So that would be this assignment all finished up. Our last step would be to save our work. So again, you can click on the big red A, or you can click save or save as. You're going to want to make sure that you save it to your flash drive. Since I'm on my own laptop, I don't have to save to my flash drive, but I'll save it to my AutoCAD assignments. And for our file name is going to be BSC 1210. Our last name in all caps, our first name lower, and then dash. Let me just check what I want it called. Site plan. And then make sure you're saving it as a DWG, but you don't have to type that DWG part. And then you can save and submit.